Hello everyone, I made this video recently with the intention of including it in my previous video, the video on the acrylic painting techniques. However, I realized in total the video would be rather long, over an hour, so I decided to do two separate videos, this one being less of a tutorial and more of a demonstration, but I had fun all the same. The painting took about 4 hours to complete. As you will see, this painting has been done fairly quickly, but I was requested to give a demonstration with the palette in view as well. So the theme of this video is Matchbox Memories. Now, I grew up building Matchbox kits and they were a great inspiration to me in terms of my aviation art and my career. I've mentioned this before, and I've always loved box art in general, but especially the artwork of the greats like Roy Huxley, who did the box art for Matchbox, and Roy Cross and others. So my first Matchbox modeling themed tutorial was of the Matchbox NAT, the 72nd scale NAT. This one is the 72nd scale F-86 Sabre. This is a kit I built for the first time way back, I think in 1983. I was 8 years old at the time, and built I think another 3 or 4 since then over the years. And the one featured in this video is one I built about 3 years ago. So it was a great bit of nostalgia to put one together again, give it a nice shiny silver scheme and lovely decals, and put it on the lovely Matchbox display stand and using it as a feature in this video. As mentioned, this is less of a tutorial and more of a demonstration, so I'm not going to spend too much time waffling or talking too much, but I will mention a couple of points as I go along. So for those of you who are new to my work or new to my videos, I start off by sketching the aircraft first in pencil, and then I go over the lines I want to keep with a fine tipped ballpoint pen. I don't push too hard, but just to get a faint line with pen. Then I rub out the lines I don't need, that I don't want, and I get ready to paint. So in this initial stage, I'm basically just putting the color in there. I'm covering the canvas with the color washes. You'll see the faint line of the pen shining through. In spite of me covering it with paint, that's fine, that's exactly what I want. Even coming over again with the second layer of acrylic paint, that faint pen line is still visible. But it's just there, just an outline, just a guide for me when I start working on the jet itself. Generally speaking, I use probably around 2 layers in the background to get the initial colors, the tones that I want, and then another 3 to 4 layers in terms of finishing, detail of the clouds, detail of the landscape in the background. The aircraft itself, in this case, is a highly polished aluminium metal aircraft, which will take anything between 5 to 10 layers of paint. But the process is fairly quick. Acrylic dries very quickly, so that's a huge advantage. It's an advantage to me. Some artists don't like acrylic for that reason, but I really enjoy it and I'm totally at home with the medium. So once my first layer is complete and everything's in place and the first layer is dry, I come over that with a second layer of thin paint. Now my intention here is not to cover the work I've done, but to enhance it, to complement it. I'm also left with a rather textured rough effect after the first coat. You can see the brush strokes, you can see this texture of the canvas shining through the paint. I want to cover that, I want to get rid of that, I want a uniform coat of paint, and I achieve that by applying a thin second layer. So as I progress, I'll start to use thicker paint, which is for the most part the last 20-30% of the painting when it comes to doing detailed work, the finishing, especially on the aircraft, doing the insignia and markings, and the sun reflecting off the bare metal. Okay, so that sky and clouds looking okay for now. I'll get back to that later. But now for the fun part. And that is obviously the F-86 Sabre. So I'm going to get going with that. I've mixed a basic grey, it's kind of a warmish grey, and I'm going to give the whole aircraft a single layer of grey. It's going to look completely dead and flat, the first layer, but just to get the whole surface of the aircraft, the profile of that aircraft, it's in the sky, get it covered, and then I'm going to start with the layers, coming in with darks and lights and give it that 3D effect. So something you haven't seen much of in this video is me spraying my water. I've got a water spray bottle handy which I use all the time, and I spray my paints to keep them wet on my palette. So remember that, always keep your paints wet. I've mentioned that in my previous video, and even the grey that I'm using at the moment, I can continue using that the whole day provided I spray it every 10 to 15 minutes. There's no problem. Apart from keeping it wet, I also want to keep it thin. So I don't want to overspray it, I don't want a whole pool of water on my palette, but I definitely want to keep the surface of that paint wet. So now the Sabre is starting to look like something. Happy with the progress so far. The basic rough 3D effect is in, basic metal effect is there. Next I'm going to move on to the insignia and markings. The whole approach to this painting is pretty rough. It's a quick demonstration. For now, putting everything in. If I want to change something, I can. I can mix a similar grey or whatever colour I want and do a touch-up and shape things the way I want them. continuing now with the star and bar insignia, just putting it in roughly for now. But the whole process of doing detailed work like this is made so much easier by the fact that I can rest my hand on the canvas, and that's a wonderful advantage of the quick drying acrylics. And now I'm going to enhance the 3D effect further by adding some panel lines, putting in some individual panels with a darker shade of grey, and of course coming in with the highlights after that, just bringing that bare metal to life. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, the most important part of finishing is in the contrasts. In other words, the dark areas versus the light areas. It's more important than the surface detail or adding every screw, nut and bolt. Your visual 3D effect is brought to life by adding the contrasts. In other words, making your dark areas darker and your light areas lighter. Now obviously one doesn't want to overdo this effect. This must never be overdone. It's very subtle, but it is also vital. So this is something to practice and to be able to master, to be able to create a 3D effect. Adding a last few details, added a bit of cockpit detail as well, and I think it's looking rather nice. It is very rough, but there again it is a demonstration. After I'd finished working on the jet, I felt the painting needed a few more warmer tones, so I added a few warm colours to the background, just light colour washes, and a bit of warmth to the aircraft as well. You'll see these changes in the final image of the painting at the end of the video. And in closing, this video has got a very similar format to what I've done before, so please excuse the repetition, but maybe it's of help to someone out there, maybe it can inspire. Maybe there's a couple of things I mentioned here that I haven't mentioned in the previous video, so if so, that's great. For the last part of this video, I've had the camera zoomed in on the jet to capture some of the detail work that I've added, so I've excluded the palette on the left, so apologies for that. But I'm glad you could see in the first part of the video how I approach color mixing and arrange the paints on my palette and so forth. I think that pretty much wraps it up. If you like what you see, if you enjoy what I do, please like and subscribe. Until next time, thank you very much.